Feel like I just need to set the scene for you. I have a cozy fall candle lit with some hot apple cider, and I'm actually going to be recording one of the most highly requested episodes we've ever had. I was very surprised by the amount of questions and DMs that I've been getting about this topic recently, and so I'm excited for this episode. And like I said, I was surprised. I know that my audience is more driver and analytical buyers, but it didn't occur to me that people would really super enjoy an episode like this. This is one of those things that I feel like typically we dig in on the back end with clients, and it can be hard to talk about on social media because you don't really want to give your audience math homework, but we're going to do it on the podcast today. So let's get into it. I had a client come to us who was reaching between 8 and 10 million people per month on social media, 8 to 10 million people, and was making about 10K per month. I talked about this in a recent episode. Let me say that again. 8 to 10 million people in reach in a month, about $10,000 per month in revenue. And with 3 months of working together, they hit $80,000 and now consistently doing well over $100,000 per month, multiple 6 figures. So what changed? She had massive reach. People loved her content. Her tutorials were getting millions of views. She had great engagement, a following, but wasn't making very much money. And this is the problem that I see over and over and over again, because people think that if they just get more views, more followers, more engagement, then the money will come. And then it doesn't. And they don't know what to do because views don't equal revenue. Engagement doesn't equal revenue. Followers don't equal revenue. What equals revenue is conversion at every single stage of your process. And most people have no idea what their conversion rates actually are. They don't know how to calculate them. They don't know what good looks like. They don't know where the breakdown is happening. And so they're optimizing the wrong thing. They're posting more content when their content to profile conversion rate is actually fine, but their profile to link conversion is less than 1% and is bleeding money. Or they're blaming their sales process when actually their content isn't activating anyone. So the people who are getting on calls aren't already pre-sold. So today I'm going to walk you through the exact metrics that you need to be tracking at every stage of your funnel, how to calculate them, what is good, what metrics indicate that something is broken, and how do we fix it. And I'm going to break down the 8 buying triggers that we added to this client's content that took them from 10-ish K months to 80K months in 90 days. Not because they posted more, actually they posted less content, not because they got more views, but because the content started converting. I mentioned this in an email that I wrote recently, also unpacking this for the people on my list, and I did the math. And if her content had been converting, her content, her profile, her application, her sales process had been converting at the same metrics that ours does, she would have been making upwards of like $1.5 to $2 million per month. So when I tell you that knowing your numbers is so unbelievably important, I need you to listen to me. Before we get into it, I'm Kenda, founder of Vanity Media, the only social media neuromarketing firm in existence. Our content system is responsible for over $323 million in revenue across 3,000 plus clients. And the reason we're able to do that is because we're not guessing. We're tracking data. We're optimizing based on neuroscience and metrics, not thoughts and feelings and vibes and embodiment. So let's get into it. Let me tell you what was actually happening with this client when she came to us, because even though she was getting millions of views, like I said, hundreds of thousands of profile visits, people were going to the profile because they loved the tutorials. They were binging the content. But then here was the breakdown. The profile to link conversion was less than 2%, and it fluctuated between actually like less than 1% and then up to 2%. It was very inconsistent. We'll go with the higher metric even just to be conservative here. And so then that 2% was clicking the link in her bio to apply. When people did click the link, they were not applying. because there was nothing to sell them on. It was just information and tutorials. There was no activation. There was no desire. There was no compulsion to actually work with her. And so then when people did apply, close rate was actually pretty high, but partially that was because the price was just way too low and charging so little that it was almost a no-brainer for people to say yes. Didn't need to have any sales skills whatsoever. Another problem was that the offer wasn't scalable. Only have 8 clients at a time. So even with a basically 90% close rate, it was capped at how much money she could actually make. And on top of that, she was working her butt off, you guys. She was creating so much content, doing all these tutorials, reaching millions of people and making like 10K per month. And I know that that is such a frustrating place to be in because she's not the only client. Definitely that is a huge amount of reach and a very big income discrepancy. But we see this all the time. People that have millions of followers reaching millions of people per month, and they're hardly making any money, which I think really just goes to show that views are not the problem. For you, views are not the problem. Views are almost never the problem because even if you're reaching 50 to 100,000 people per month, if your conversion rate is high, you don't really need to reach that many people to hit your revenue targets. So it's really not about reach. It's about taking the people that you are already reaching and actually turning them into a sale. So what was actually broken? We're going to unpack some of these things and then we're going to dive into the specific metrics that you should be tracking. So number 1, the content wasn't selling. Like I said, she was educating people, giving them tons of value, but wasn't activating them. She wasn't triggering those buying triggers that make people want to work with you, was not connecting with symptoms, wasn't positioning against a villain, wasn't elevating her authority through the authority trifecta, even though she had so many results to share from the clients that she did have, wasn't handling objections, was not showing gaps or mistakes. And like I said, was just sharing screenshots. There was no results. And here's the transformation. Here's how we got here. Here's where they started. There was nothing to activate that emotional resonance. It was just here's 3 tips, videos, tutorials, educational content that did get a lot of views and engagement, but doesn't convert. Like, if this doesn't tell you that visibility is not the problem, I don't know what will. I don't know what will convince you of that if this doesn't. Number 2, pricing was way too low. So she was undervaluing herself and her results. And because the price was so low, she would have had to have a ton of clients to make any real money, but the offer structure didn't allow for that. And so, like I said, the offer wasn't scalable. Could only work with like 8 clients at a time. So even though she had a wait list, like revenue was capped out. That's as high as we could fly. So here's what we actually did. First, we added those missing buying triggers into her content. So it would actually sell people before they ever talk to her. And when I talk about activating people to buy, what I mean by that is you are activating the release of dopamine in people's brain. You're opening an anticipation loop that is directly linked to your offer. That's what activation actually means. Then we raised the price. Then we made the offer more scalable. And like I said, the result, okay, to 80 in 90 days. And before I break down what we specifically changed in the content, I need you to understand the metrics that we were tracking, because without tracking the right metrics, you're literally just flying blind. Most people are tracking the wrong metrics if they are tracking any metrics at all. They're looking at views, followers, likes, comments, vanity metrics. And don't get me wrong, those metrics can tell you something, but they don't tell you if your content is actually converting. So what are the metrics that matter? Number 1, content to profile conversion. So of all the people in a month that see your content, so your total reach from your account, what percentage of those people actually click over to your profile? That is the rate at which your content is converting. The second metric that you need to be tracking is your profile to your link conversion. This is one of the most important metrics, because if people are coming to your profile and you have a good amount of traffic coming to your profile, but then no one's clicking the link in your bio, no one's buying from you. Number 3, the link to application conversion. So what percentage of people who actually click that link and land on your application page actually complete and submit the application? Number 4 is your show rate. This is very important. Now, this goes for sales calls, of course, which the majority of our clients are doing sales calls. So we need to know what percentage of the sales calls that you book actually show up, because if they don't show up, you can't sell to them. And then number 5 is close rate. So what percentage of people who show up to that live call do you actually close? And there is a caveat to that, but we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But those are the 5 metrics that will tell you almost everything you need to know about where in the funnel is actually broken and what you need to optimize. So let's break down each one in more depth. Metric number 1, that content to profile conversion. This is the percentage of people who see your content and then go to your profile. You can do this on a macro or a micro level. So you don't need to calculate every single post unless you're doing over like $3 million a year and you're trying to make those micro adjustments to get to 5 to 10. If you're not there yet, if you're not doing like 3 mil a year, we don't really need to know from every single individual piece of content. If we can get an idea of like the last 7 days, last 14, 30, last 90, then we're in a really good spot. So how do we calculate it? Profile visits divided by reach times 100. That will give you that percentage. So if your post reached, let's say 1,000 people, now this is on the micro level, but it's just an easy example. If your post reaches 1,000 people and 50 people visit your profile, then your content to profile conversion rate is about 5%. So where do we find these numbers? Instagram Insights. You can see the reach and you can see profile visits. And again, you can see that on the micro level of like each individual post, or you can see that on the macro level of whatever that time frame is that you have set in your metrics. So you can find your reach, you can find your profile visits, and you want to calculate this off of reach, not views, because views are not an accurate way to calculate this. Because if you have, let's say, 100,000 monthly views, but on average people watch your video 2.5 times, especially if you post a lot of B-roll content where it's looping multiple times as people are just reading it, then that's not going to be an accurate metric, because likely if you're reaching 100,000 views and your average person watches your video, like I said, 2.5 times, then you're probably only reaching like 40,000 actual people. So you can see how that would skew the metric a lot. So make sure you're calculating off of reach, not views. And for most people, you can calculate this on a weekly or monthly basis just by taking your total reach, your total profile visit, and doing that calculation. So what is good? Really good is like 5 to 10%. 3 to 5% is okay, but there's room for improvement. But if you're converting between 3 and 5%, that's probably not going to be your bleeding neck issue. That's probably not going to be your blazing red flag where you're losing a lot of money. Now, if you're doing less than 3%, you have a problem. That means that your content isn't resonating. People are not interested enough in the topic that you're talking about to even want to go see what you do. They're probably not even watching your full video. So your average view duration is going to be a lot shorter. And potentially, even if you are talking about the right topic, you're not doing it in a way that is triggering that dopamine. You're not opening that anticipation loop that makes people want to go over to your profile and binge your content. So like I said, if your content to profile conversion is less than 3%, your content just isn't activating people. It's not making them curious enough. It's not compelling enough to want to learn more about you. So what does it mean if this metric is low? If your content to profile conversion is low, like I said, it means one of two things. Your hook is probably bad. So your opening line, your first 3 seconds, or your text overlay, whatever it is that's supposed to grab attention, isn't working. It's not pattern interrupting enough. It's not activating that emotional resonance. So it's not specific enough, and it's not activating the primal brain. The other potential issue is the symptom or topic that you're talking about just isn't resonating with your audience. So you're not connecting with what they're actually experiencing. You're just talking about generic problems, generic goals, instead of specific symptoms that they're living with every single day. Now, I rarely see this issue with clients because we're pretty dialed in on symptoms and hitting those buying triggers. But if you're creating content and you're not getting people to your profile, that's a big issue. So how do we fix it? One, you need to connect with specific symptoms. You need to mirror back their lived experience so they think, wow, that's me. She gets me. I need to go see what else she has to say because I think this person can help me. And we're going to do a deep dive on symptoms in just a minute. But first, let me walk you through the other metrics, okay? Metric number 2 is profile to link conversion. This is the percentage of people who visit your profile, then click the link in your bio. So how do we calculate it? Link clicks divided by profile visits times 100. That will give you that metric. For example, if 100 people visited your profile and 5 people clicked your link, your profile to link conversion is 5%. So where do we pull those numbers from? Again, Instagram Insights. So you want to get your profile visits, and it will also tell you how many people are clicking that link in your bio. Now, keep in mind that you probably are not going to want to calculate your application rate. That's the next metric we're going to talk about based off of what Instagram says your link clicks actually is, because you likely have people going to that link from multiple traffic sources. You can also look at this through Google Analytics if you're using UTM links, which you should be. But just for this quick calculation, you can do this just from the metrics that Instagram gives you. You can do this on every platform. You can do this on TikTok. You can do this on Pinterest. You can do this on basically every platform as long as you are getting the amount of people that are coming to your profile, as long as that platform gives you that metric, and then it gives you the metric of how many people are clicking that link from that place. And again, you can do that with Google Analytics as well. So what does good look like? 5 to 8% is really good. 3 to 5% is okay. Less than 3% is an issue. A lot of our clients have way higher than 5 to 8%. Ours is quite a bit higher than that, but that's because my content is super dialed in so that people are really, really sold even by the time they get to my profile. People are really, really sold by the time they would decide to click that link because they've binged my content. My content is very strategically engineered to create that conversion, and we even are very strategic with the order in which we post content, what we post and when, so that as people are scrolling through and binging, we are moving people through those 3 phases of decision making in the brain. So what does it mean if the metric is low? If your profile to link clicks conversion is not good, it means something on your profile isn't working. I would say the top 4 things that we typically see are: number 1, your bio isn't clear or it's not compelling. So people don't understand what you do well enough, who you help, and why they should click. They don't understand what they're going to get. Number 2, your highlights aren't doing their job. Your highlights should be selling people on working with you. They should showcase results, handle objections, demonstrate authority, paint the outcome. If they're just random stories that you've saved or generic FAQs, I guarantee you they're not converting. We recommend treating highlights kind of like the nav bar on your website. So I want to see a start here, your story, a breakdown of your offerings, some objection handling, results, etc. Number 3, potentially your pin posts aren't strategic. Those should be your best performing, highest converting pieces of content, not necessarily your highest viewed content, highest converting. They should reinforce your authority, show results, connect with specific symptoms, or position you against your villain. If they're just random posts or the posts that you got the most views on, you're missing an opportunity. Another, like the 4th really common thing we see is that the CTA in your bio is actually just super weak. So if your CTA is just click here, or you don't have one at all, it's not really painting the transformation. It's not creating desire. How do we fix it? Optimize your bio, make it very clear who you help, what you do, what outcome they'll get. Optimize your highlights, make sure they're strategically showcasing results, authority, objection handling, outcomes. Pin your best content, top converting, so the posts that convert the highest from content to profile, pin those, and then rewrite your CTA. Paint the transformation, make them want to click. As you're going through and calculating these metrics, and if you're realizing that there's a gap somewhere, content isn't converting as it should be, your profile isn't converting as it should be, your application isn't converting as it should be, which that can actually be a content issue, depends. Please go head down to the show notes and book in that content audit. People are actually shocked and floored by the amount of value that they receive inside of that audit. I get DMs all the time saying that they absolutely can't believe that we do this for free and that they got more out of it, more direct feedback and direction from that free audit than they got from 15, 20, 50K plus programs. So when I tell you this audit is worth your time, it is incredible. Our team reviews the content on your account. We dig into which of those 8 buying triggers are missing that is driving down your conversion. We give you direct feedback about what is missing and why, and examples of what should be included. And then we write you 5 custom pieces of content that you can post tomorrow to generate leads in your business. We've had people make upwards of $6,000 off of the content that we give them just in the free audit and bring in $40,000+ worth of leads from the content that we give them for free. All of this is delivered to you on an audit review call with our team. They walk you through this custom 3-page document that we create for you and how to create that content, what that should look like. For most people at that point, they're like, that's lovely. Need you to do that for me. Great, we'll walk you through what that looks like. If not, great, take your audit and run with it. So metric number 3, This is your link to application conversion. So this is the percentage of people who click your link and then submit an application. How do we calculate it? Applications submitted divided by link clicks times 100. So if 100 people clicked your link and 5 people applied, your link to application conversion is 5%. So where do we pull the numbers? You will track this through your application platform typically. So Typeform, whatever you're using, and your link click data. So this is where your UTMs are going to be really helpful because you can see exactly where people are coming from. So what does good look like? 5 to 8% is good. 3% is the minimum. Less than 3% is not good. What does it mean if this metric is low? If your link to application conversion is low, it means something is broken in your application process. I'm going to give you the 4 most likely ones. Number 1, your landing page copy isn't selling them. So they click the link, they land on your page, and they're not convinced. The copy isn't painting the outcome. It's not handling objections. It's not making them feel like this is the solution they've been looking for. Number 2, there's too much friction. So maybe your application is too long. Maybe you're asking too many questions. Maybe the page takes forever to load. Maybe there's a technical error. People can't even submit the stupid form. Friction. Okay. Number 3, your questions in the application are actually killing the sale. So if you're asking questions that make people feel disqualified or questions that create objections, people will drop off before they submit. I see this all the time. People who aren't getting any applications, their second question is like, hey, the minimum investment to work with me is $20K. Don't book this call if you can't do that. People are like, okay. And then they're like, why am I not getting applications? Gee, I can't imagine why. Could I afford to pay you $25K? Yeah. Am I going to? When that's your second question or even your last question and you phrase it like that? No. I'm certainly not, because I don't even know what you offer. I don't know if it's worth that. Don't do that. Anyway, number 4, placement or loading errors. So sometimes it's as simple as the button isn't clickable on mobile, or the page doesn't load, or the form is broken. So I want you to audit your landing page. Make sure the copy is actually selling the outcome, not just listing features. Simplify your application. Only ask the questions that you need to actually qualify people. Every additional question is a conversion killer. Test your application on multiple devices and make sure it loads fast. Make sure the buttons work. Make sure there's no errors. Our application is structured very strategically to get buy-in. It's also short. It's to the point. That first page is what we know people need to hear from us. And ours is actually converting at about 28% is our completion rate. Yes, 5 to 8% is good. That's a really good spot to be in, but it can go a lot higher. And that's where those little tiny optimizations come into play as you're going from 3 to 5 mil up to 10. By the way, when I talk about revenue metrics in the millions, I am talking about annual revenue. I'm not talking about, oh, I've been in business for 5 years and I've tallied up every dollar that I've made and I'm going to tell you I have a $10 million business. That's not what I'm talking about. Just wanted to throw that in there. Metric number 4, show rate. So this is the percentage of people who book a call and actually show up. So how do we calculate it? Calls that showed divided by calls booked times 100. So if 100 people booked calls and 75 people showed up, congratulations, your show rate is 75%. You'll probably just want to use a spreadsheet to calculate this. So what is good? 75% is the goal. 60% is the bare minimum. Ours is around 81%. So like I said, as you continue to scale, making those micro adjustments, if you can be around 75%, you're doing great. What does it mean if the metric is low? If your show rate is low, it's usually one of 3 things. One is there's a technical issue. So people are having trouble joining Zoom. They're not getting the link. They're not getting reminders. There's just a technical problem that is preventing people from getting on. Number 2 is your discovery process is creating objections. So maybe you're sending too many emails before the call. People are taking themselves out of it. Like I said, you ask questions in the application that kind of make them feel disqualified. And so even if they book the call, maybe they don't show up. Maybe you're not doing enough to build excitement for the call. Maybe your reminders are not going out at the correct times. There can be a lot of issues with the process itself. Third issue potentially is that they're just not qualified. People are booking calls that aren't actually a fit. They're more likely to no-show because they realize that this call just isn't for them. How do we fix it? Improve your reminder sequence. So we want to send reminders that build excitement, reinforce why they booked the call in the first place. And that goes far beyond just being like, we're so excited to chat with you. That's not what I'm talking about. And make sure that they're strategically placed so that people are getting those reminders reminders at key points so that they actually remember to show up. Qualify people better. Make sure people booking calls are actually a fit. So if you're getting a lot of calls booked, but your no-show rate is really high, it could be that there's actually not enough friction in that process. Also, you need to reduce the time between booking and the call. The longer the gap, the more likely they are to no-show. A lot of people, they're like, gosh, no one shows up to my sales calls. But yeah, because you're letting them book 2 weeks out. They're not going to remember. I would say 3 days at the max. And just about every single multi-million dollar founder who has a sales team would agree with me. Metric number 5 is your close rate. This is the percentage of calls that result in a sale. So this one seems pretty self-explanatory. Closed deals divided by calls held times 100. So that's your percentage. So if you had 10 calls, you close 5, close rate's 50%. Now, technically, close rate should be calculated using your offer rate, which is the percentage of live calls that you actually pitched because they were a fit. So for simplicity, just get a pulse check on where you're at. You can calculate it as live calls divided by closes, get a rough number. But if you want to really dial in on this and get a deeper insight into lead quality, you'll want to be also tracking your offer rate. So this is important because let's say you have 8 calls in a day and 50% of them are unqualified. So 4 of those 8 calls are people who can't afford to work with you. They're not a fit to work with you. They are somebody who you don't want to work with. So 50% of your leads are unqualified and then you only close, let's say 2. That feels like your close rate is a lot lower than it is. But if you're closing 2 out of 4 qualified calls, your close rate is 50%. So there's a lot of discourse around how this metric should be calculated. I personally think you should calculate both so that you have an understanding of what your lead quality is. But it happens to us all the time because we get a ton of applications. Now, we do our best to just cancel calls with people who we know aren't going to be a fit right off the bat. You would probably be shocked to know how often that happens, but you would probably be even more shocked to know how many people get on the phone, get on these sales calls, and we don't even pitch them. We're like, yep, no thank you, have a nice day. It's kind of wild to think about. Now, granted, most of these people are not people we'd actually want to work with, which doesn't necessarily mean that they're unqualified. It's just I review the applications and I'm like, no thanks, which we're able to do because we have a high volume of inquiries, but we turn away hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of applications every single week. So again, this is important to know. What is the lead quality? If we got a ton of leads last week, but they were all super low quality leads, they weren't a fit, they're not people we want to work with. What did we post? Why did that happen? Where'd they come from? This is important to know. So what is good? 40 to 50% close rate is bare minimum. 60% really good. If you are creeping into like, I close every single person I get on the call with territory, your price is too low. I hate to break it to you. So if it's too low, typically means one of these things. Number one, your sales process is broken. So maybe you're not handling objections well, you're not building enough desire on the call, you're not really getting to the root of those gaps that they're experiencing, you're not painting the outcome clearly, you're not pitching in a way that's linking to your offer, you are getting the wrong leads, potentially. It's number 2. If people are getting on calls that aren't pre-sold, or who aren't actually a fit, your close rate is going to suffer. 3, your price is off. Maybe your price is way too high for the perceived value. Maybe your price is way too low, and so people don't take it seriously. They're like, what the heck? I always give this analogy. You find a couch on Facebook Marketplace. It's listed for $100. You're like, what's wrong with the couch? There's got to be something wrong with the couch. Are there termites living in that couch? Like, what is living in that couch? It can't be good. You can list the exact same couch with the same photos for $1,000. Suddenly people are like, wow, that's a great couch. What a nice couch. Really like that. Would like to have that in my house. And so you can actually be shooting yourself in the foot by having your price be too low, because then people aren't taking you seriously. They're like, what's wrong with this couch? I don't want to sit on that couch. I'm going to get a disease from that couch. Okay, kind of time to move on from the couch. Number 4, and this is probably the single most common one, your discovery is trash. You're not asking the right questions to really uncover pain, desire, urgency. If you're not doing that, you're not going to close. You're creating objections for yourself, and people don't actually understand the value behind your offer because you haven't connected it to those psychological triggers that need to be present for someone to buy. So fix your sales process. Make sure you're doing proper discovery, handling objections, painting the outcome, creating urgency. Improve your lead quality. And by the way, by urgency, I don't mean there's only one spot left. If you only have one spot left, I should not say this. I should really keep my mouth shut. Could, won't. So if you're seeing people in the month of November, just so you know, if you're seeing people right about now posting on social media being like, I only have 2 spots left to work with me for the rest of this year, I need you to know that they're doing a buy now, start later Black Friday promotion. They are not booked out because they just have so much demand and they can't possibly take one more client. They're doing a buy now, start later Black Friday. So they're going to sign up 1 or 2 more people, supposedly. You never know. They're probably signing like 5 or 10 behind the scenes, but they're going to sign up however many more people. And then they're going to launch Black Friday on a buy now, start later. So they're going to collect payment and then they're going to onboard people the first of the year. They're just not going to onboard people in December and like low key take December off, which is fine. By all means, take December off. But I just want you to know that if you're seeing that discourse where it's like, this is the last chance this year to get in, that's not coming from a place of like, we're so full and we just can't handle any more people. I just need you to know it's a buy now, start later Black Friday promotion, which is great. Use that. Lots of our clients do buy now, start later. That's wonderful. I just thought maybe you should be aware of that. Anyway, so when I say creating urgency within the sales process, what I mean is you're building urgency around solving the problem. You're building urgency around the result that they want. And that urgency is an ethical form of urgency because it's like they want to move now because they want the result now. And they just spent, if you did discovery correctly, they just spent the last however many 25 minutes explaining to you what their problems are, why they can't solve them for themselves, why they need you to solve the problem, and why they need you to solve the problem right now. If you did discovery properly, they just explained all of that to you. And so there's no way they can give you an objection. An objection means that you missed something in discovery. Should you be equipped to handle objections? Yes, because even the best closers are going to miss things. But when you close somebody that has no objections, no concerns, it's because you did thorough discovery. That's what that looks like. When it's just like, okay, how long is the program? Okay, great. That's not an objection. That's a buying question. Anyway, the other thing you should be doing is improving your lead quality. So make sure that people getting on calls are pre-sold through your content, that they're actually who you want to work with so that you're activating the emotional resonance within people who are actually your ideal client, and test your pricing. Make sure it's aligned with not only the value you're providing and the ROI, but also the market and the people that you're wanting to sell to. So to recap, here's the 5 metrics you need to be tracking. Number 1 is content to profile. 5 to 10% is good. Less than 3%, something's broken. Profile to your link. So 5 to 8% is good. Less than 3%, something wrong. Link to application. 5 to 8% is good. Less than 3%, there's something wrong. Show rate. 75 is percent is the goal, 60 is the minimum. Close rate, 40 to 50% is the minimum, and 60 plus is great, but just make sure that if you keep creeping up like so far above 60, your price is probably too low. So if any of those metrics are below the minimum, that should be your focus. That's where the breakdown is happening. And the good news is that it's very rare that more than 2 of these metrics are below the minimum at the same time. Usually there's one specific bottleneck in your process, and once you fix that, then everything else improves. I also need to say that a lot of people don't seem to understand what good marketing, what good content will actually do for your business, because it's not just about getting more leads. It's about getting higher quality leads. It's about taking less time in the sales process. By having better content, you can actually make more money simply by having your closers be available to take more calls, because the calls are only taking 30 to 45 minutes instead of an hour and a half. If the sales calls are taking an hour and a half, they're having to do a lot of selling. They're having to do a lot of objection handling, and it's because your content isn't doing its job. If you're having to set a ton of follow-up calls, we actually have instituted a KPI for our closers that they are not allowed to go above a certain amount of follow-up calls. If you have to book a follow-up for every single person that you're closing, 1, you're not a very good closer, and 2, your content is not doing its job. And there's also an aspect of shortening the sales cycle. Again, if people are really sold through your content, then you've moved them through, you've activated the primal brain, you've helped the emotional part of the brain make the decision, you've provided all of the information that it needs, you've helped them through the justification phase, you've provided the brain with everything that it needs to justify the decision, then they're already ready to buy. So it's just a matter of applying your pitch to their specific situation and signing them up. So now that you know what to track and what's good, let me show you how to actually fix those metrics. And specifically, I want to talk you through what we did for that client I mentioned in the beginning. So we know that there's 8 buying triggers that drive conversion, but I am going to specifically in this episode hit home to the 6 that were missing from this client's content because this is the most common. So like I said, this client was reaching millions of people, but her content was not converting because it was missing those buying triggers that make people want to work with you. Creating educational content. So here's 3 tips for this. Here's how to do Y, tutorials, information, value. And people really did love it. They engaged with it. They watched it. They saved it. They shared it. But they didn't buy because education without activation is just consumption. It's not conversion. So here are those buying triggers that we added into her content. Number 1, connecting with symptoms. This is how you activate the primal brain. This and connecting with hitting home to your villain, how you activate the primal brain. You have to get the brain's attention before it can even consider working with you. Elevating authority, it's that authority trifecta. I did a full episode on that. Objection handling, speaking to gaps and mistakes, and then results beyond just screenshots. So let me write down each one, what it does, how it drives conversion through each stage of your sales process. So trigger number 1, those symptoms, connecting with what they're actually experiencing. This is that first trigger that we added in. Most people talk about problems or goals. You want to grow your business. You're struggling to get clients. You want to make more money. First of all, that's way too generic. And so it doesn't actually activate the primal brain. Symptoms are different. Symptoms are specific, lived experience of the problem. The problem is the cause, the symptoms are the effect. And that is what you are speaking to because that is what they're aware of. It's how they're experiencing it day to day. So it's not you're struggling to get clients. It's you wake up at 6 a.m. and check your DMs, hoping that somebody responded to your post from yesterday. Literally nothing. You're refreshing your email, still nothing. You see a competitor post about signing a client and you feel sick to your stomach. You tell yourself that you're going to post something today, but you have no idea what to say that will actually get people to message you. Those are specific symptoms. It's specific. It's visceral. That's me. When somebody reads or hears their exact experience described, the primal brain goes, this person gets me. They understand what I'm going through. I need to pay attention. That's when they stop scrolling. That's when they go to your profile. I did another full episode about activating dopamine, creating that anticipation loop that drives people to your profile. Connecting with symptoms is a huge part of that. I love to give the example of if you're going to the doctor, you have a sore throat. Your sore throat is your symptom. That is what you are actively experiencing. The cause is that you have strep. The effect is that your throat hurts. That is the symptom. And so that is what you are aware of. What most people do is they create content about strep. They try to convince you how great they are at getting rid of strep throat. When in reality, they don't know they have strep throat. They just know that their throat hurts. That's the difference there. And so what is this going to improve? Which metric? Your content to profile conversion. If your content to profile conversion is low, it's typically because you're not connecting with symptoms. You're being way too generic. And this is also where when people are like, well, how do you know if every single post is doing what it's supposed to do? You can't track last attribution with organic content. First of all, with ManyChat, yes, you can. Second of all, ManyChat and UTM links, yes, you absolutely can. Second of all, applications is not always the outcome that we're looking for with every single post. We have to bring new people into your audience to be able to convert them. We have to stop people from scrolling and bring them over to your account. This is what connecting with symptoms does. So we want to see a healthy percentage of people coming over from your content. And again, we don't need to do this on a post by post basis. You can if you want to, but realistically, we just need to look at your total reach. We need to for the month, and we just need to see what is the average conversion rate across all of your content. That tells us if we're trending up and to the right. So you're typically just being too generic. So what this looked like for the client, it was like, are you struggling to grow your Instagram? Here's 3 tips. And then we rewrote it to actually connect with specific symptoms. You post every day, but your views are dropping, or you're doing everything that the algorithm experts are saying to do, but nothing is working. Or you see people with half your followers getting twice the engagement, and you don't understand what's wrong with your content. You're starting to wonder if maybe you're just not cut out for this. Those are symptoms. Yes, struggling to grow is something that they're feeling, but that's not really going to create that visceral reaction. That's not going to activate the primal brain and get it to perk up, because the primal brain is constantly in search of how to relieve pain that it's experiencing, because pain threatens your survival. If you're in pain, you can't hunt. You're going to die. You won't have anything to eat. That's how your brain is processing information. And so we have to activate the primal brain just to get people's attention. And when you do that, when you get it to perk up and go, ooh, this person can maybe, because they understand me, alleviate my pain, then they're over on your profile binging your content. So please stop talking about generic problems. Stop talking about the cause. Start describing the exact specific daily experiences of the problem and ask yourself, what does their day look like when they're experiencing the problem? What are they doing? What are they feeling? What are they thinking? Paint that picture, mirror it back to them. That is how you activate the primal brain. And I can tell you that the best symptoms content typically comes from your own experience. If you can reflect upon where you were at, what you were feeling, the things you were doing, and pull out those dirty little thoughts that you had that you would be embarrassed to share with people, that is the type of content that we're looking for. We are looking for the type of content that's like you are tapping through your competitor's Instagram story and she's posting another sale that came in and you just don't understand what's wrong with your content. It feels like you guys are talking about the same thing. So why is it just not working? You're comparing yourself to her, right? That is that thought, that thing that's going to stop people in their tracks because it's like, wait a minute, how are you inside my head? One of the posts that I got a lot of DMs from that was like, how are you inside my head, was my very unhinged post about why it's super important to have a villain. That was the point of the post. But instead of saying your content isn't converting because you don't have a villain, which is what most people would have said, I said, you've turned yourself into the toilet paper of your industry. And people are like, what? But low key, that kind of resonates because it's like, yeah, I kind of feel undervalued. I feel low quality. I feel like run of the mill. It triggers those emotions. And people are like, wait a minute. No, that's kind of advanced. It would be better for you, probably starting out, just to say the thing that they're actually thinking, say the thing that they're actually doing. But as you get deeper into this, you get better at it. You can be a little bit more clever with it. You learn how to activate those same emotions and feelings and thoughts without saying exactly what they're experiencing, but I digress. It's more subliminal. Trigger number 2 that is going to activate the primal brain is differentiation and contrast, which is your villain. So this was the second thing that we added to her content, which she was very nervous about. Most people don't position themselves against anything. They just talk about what to do, what they do. I help you grow your business. Great. Just like everyone else. But without a villain, there's no contrast. Without contrast, the brain doesn't understand how you're different. Just telling people like, I'm different because I do this, that is not how the brain works. The brain needs to see a clear side by side. What do we not do in relation to what we actually do? And so a villain is not a person, typically. It's a belief. Most people think that you need 100,000 followers to make money. That's a load of crap. A method. Everyone's telling you to post 5 times a day. A person, could be a person, but usually not, or industry. So like generic business coaches that are giving you copy and paste templates that don't work for your business. Could be a system. The algorithm isn't the problem. Your content is. The brain thinks in contrast. When you position against something, the brain goes, okay, so if this person is not that, then they might be the thing that works for me. It creates differentiation. It makes you stand out. It makes you memorable. So what metric does this improve? Content to profile conversion and profile to link conversion. When your content has a clear villain, people are more likely to go to your profile because they're curious about your unique, different approach. And when your profile reinforces that villain through your bio, your highlights, your pin posts, they're more likely to click your link. So here's what this looks like for the client. She was not positioning herself against anything. It was just educational. Here's how to do this. So we added a villain. Everyone's telling you to post more. More low quality content isn't going to get people to follow you. Great. Now we have contrast. Posting more. Created that contrast. People resonated with that frustration immediately. Another thing that we added into the content was like, you don't have to spend an hour on a reel to get 1 million views. Here's how I create a reel in less than 15 minutes that brought in over 3 million views. So it's still providing value. There's still information, but you're activating the primal brain by providing that contrast so they understand why they should be listening to you. giving them a reason to care. So identify what you're not. What belief, method, or approach are you positioning yourself against? Then call that out. Make it clear that you're different. Create that contrast. This is especially powerful for people who are in very saturated industries. So if you're a business coach, fitness coach, content creator, there's thousands of people doing what you do, and that villain is what is going to make you different. Trigger number 3 is authority. It's that authority trifecta. We added this in heavily. We went hard on this, but not just as like, I'm an expert authority. It's that full trifecta, which has 3 legs: controversy, aspiration, and vulnerability. Most people only do 1 or 2 of those, but when you hit all 3, that's when you actually become memorable. So let me break down each. Controversy, this is where you say something that makes people stop and go, wait, what? It's a hot take. It's a contrarian opinion. It's something that challenges the status quo, something that I talked about recently. If you built your business in 2020, you didn't build a real business. You built a business on easy mode. People got really fired up about that. But also a lot of people who were sitting in that and experiencing that, they were like, yep, tell me more. That's different. It's unique. No one is willing to say that. People are like, yep. So that controversy creates attention. It makes people lean in. For some people, maybe you don't have a lot of controversial opinions outside of your villain. It's totally fine. Your villain will do the job here. But if you're willing to show up and kind of provide more of those hot takes here, and maybe it's not a core pillar of your brand, but it's something that you're willing to talk about, that will also help you double down on this. The second leg of this is aspiration. So this is where you show the outcome. You're doing a lot of future pacing. This is the result, the after state. It's proof of what you're teaching works. And this is different than posting a screenshot. This is leading by example. This is walking the talk. This is where you show you living what you teach. That is what this aspiration actually looks like. And you do want to showcase the result that you got. I talk about this a lot. We generated $585,000 in leads in one day. Our client went from 10 to 12K months to 80K months in 90 days. Aspiration creates that desire. It makes people think, I want that. But aspiration without vulnerability, that creates resentment. And so that's where the third part of this trifecta comes in, which is absolutely vital. This is where you show the flaws, the mistakes, the thing that you're not perfect at. It's humanizing, it's relatable. One piece of my authority trifecta, one way that I've hit home to this piece of the authority trifecta recently is the podcast episode from Monday, where I talked about making a $700,000 mistake because I hired people that I knew without a real process. I created a email that brought in hundreds of thousands of dollars in leads just from that one email, where I talked about having to check myself when I'm disappointed we only did 100K in sales that day. And I pull back the curtain at some of those ugly emotions. And it's also relatable because even though not everyone is making 100K in sales every day, people are experiencing the reality of consistently moving the goalpost. You hit one milestone and you're already looking ahead to the next. And so you're low-key disappointed when you hit that one milestone. And that's very relatable for people. It was vulnerable. Honestly, I was a little afraid to send that email. I wasn't 100% sure how it would be received. Like, I knew I was hitting on these things. I knew psychologically what it should do, but I was like, it was one of those things where I was like, oh gosh, I don't know if I want to put this inside thought into the outside world. But I'm so glad I did because so many people resonated with it, and it brought in a ton of leads and a ton of sales. And I also shared, outside of my $700,000 mistake, I also talked about the emotion behind that. I used to give people chance after chance after chance after chance because I was afraid of being labeled as a bitch or hard to work for. So vulnerability creates trust. It makes people think, oh, she's real, she gets it. And it shortens the gap between the aspiration and the aspirational outcome and where they currently are, so you don't have that resentment. It's more attainable for people when they see that. And so when you hit all 3 legs of the authority trifecta, you become somebody who people want to follow and binge and buy from. This is the neuroscience behind creating obsession with your brand. Controversy gets attention, aspiration creates desire, and vulnerability builds trust. So what metric does this improve? All of them, but especially profile to link conversion and link to application conversion. So when your profile showcases the authority trifecta through your highlights, your pin post, your bio, etc., people are more likely to click your link. And when your landing page or your application process reinforces that authority, people are more likely to buy. So what did this look like for this client? She wasn't really showcasing authority at all. She was just posting tutorials, wasn't being super bold, wasn't showing aspiration, wasn't being vulnerable. So we started posting content that hit all of those three legs. We had the controversy, bring in her villain, and we really doubled down on that. And the aspiration piece was those personal wins, the growth metrics, being able to grow her account. It was insane. It was like over like 5,000% month over month, hundreds of thousands of followers in a single month, showing those screenshots, showing what that looked like, but then also the vulnerability of like, I almost quit Instagram last year, and here's what I learned. I am getting these millions of views, and that's what you see, and it looks really shiny and flashy, but I'm also getting all of these negative comments, and here's how I feel about it. So then people started seeing her as an authority, not just someone who just knew their stuff, but someone who had results, had opinions, and was real, honest. We don't trust what looks too perfect. Our brain is wired not to trust what looks too perfect and polished. And so if you're looking at your account and you're like, wow, it's so aesthetic and I look so authoritative, looking competent is not the same as building authority. And so if your account looks really good and your visuals look really good, but then your conversion rate is really low because you're not bringing in the controversy and the vulnerability, can guarantee you. And this should be more or less a 1-to-1-to-1 ratio of the controversy, aspiration, and vulnerability. Now, trigger number 4, objection handling. So handling that resistance prior to the sales call. So we added this in. Most people wait until the sales call to handle objections, and even they wait until the end of the sales call to handle objections. But by then, you've already lost half of the people who could have applied because they just didn't bother. Objections are the thoughts that stop people from taking action when you boil it down. I've tried this before and it didn't work. I don't have the time. I don't have the money. I'm not sure if this will work for me. I need to think about it. If your content doesn't handle those objections, people will consume your content, love it, and then do nothing. When you handle objections in your content, you are removing the resistance before people even get into the application or the call. They're already thinking, okay, she addressed my concern. That makes sense. This is providing the information to justification phase. You have to give the rational part of the brain the information that it needs to justify the decision that they've already emotionally made. So what metrics does this improve? Link clicks to application, conversion, and show rate, and close rate. When your content handles objections, more people will apply because they've already worked through their resistance. And when people show up to calls with fewer objections, what happens? Your close rate goes up. And so prior, her content wasn't addressing any objections. She was just teaching. So people would watch and be like, wow, that's cool, but then not take action because they still had doubts. They still had concerns. And so after we added in that content, I invested in coaches before and it didn't work. That's because they gave you XYZ. Here's how I build a custom strategy for your business. I don't have time to create all this content. You don't need to post more. Here's what you need to do. Here's how much time it's actually going to take you. And pulling back the curtain, walking the talk. You can use that authority trifecta. And again, this is kind of getting a little bit more advanced, but you can use that authority building as objection handling as well, because you can pull back the curtain and show your process. How long does it actually take you? You can build that authority, you can build that aspiration, and also use it to handle an objection. Another one, I'm not sure if this will work for my niche. This is something that we added into her highlights, just literally breaking down all of the different industries and what they all kind of have in common that she's worked with and showcasing those results. And so when we added that, applications increased, close rate went up because people were already pre-sold. So I would make a list of the top 5 to 10 objections you hear on sales calls or in the DMs, and then create content that directly addresses each one, not in a defensive way, just matter of factly addressing the concern, showing why it's not an issue, or subliminally overcoming the objection. For most people, this is a huge gap in their content. If you go ahead and book that most of the time, we're either going to end up writing you objection handling content, or there's a couple others, kind of depends on what your bleeding wound is. But for the vast majority of people, it's objection handling content because people typically have an audience that is existing, that is there, that would buy from them if we just gave them the right information. So when we handle those objections, people are like, okay, take my money. And it happens very quickly. Trigger number 5 that I want to talk about here is speaking to gaps and mistakes. So really showing the discrepancy between where they are and where they want to be. So when we added this in, what most people do is they just give solutions. Here's how to do this. Here's 3 tips for how to do this. But if you don't show the gap, the discrepancy between where they are and where they want to be, they don't feel any urgency to change. This is how you create ethical urgency. Because if they don't have that desire and they don't have those symptoms, they're not even going to watch the content. So you don't have to worry about like, am I pressuring people in the sales process? They're not even going to be in your stupid sales process if you do this correctly. They're not even going to be there. They're not even going to submit an application. They're not even going to watch your content. But I digress. So this is about showing them what they're doing wrong and essentially the opportunity cost. What is it costing them? So example from my content, you're educating your audience, but you're not activating them. This is a core pillar of my brand. I talk about this all the time. It's why they consume your content, but they don't buy. So why does this drive conversion? When you show somebody the gap, their brain goes, I see it. I need to fix this. It creates productive discomfort and it makes them realize that they have a problem that they didn't know they had. And once they see that gap, they start seeking the solution. And that's when they go to your profile. This acts as the bridge between the emotional decision-making process and the rational part of decision-making, which is the justification phase. This acts as a bridge between those two. So it's very, very important. So this is when they go to your profile, they click the link, and that's when they apply after you've moved them into the justification phase. So what metric does this improve? Content to profile conversion, yes. And profile to link conversion. When your content shows gaps and mistakes, people are activated, they realize they need help, and they want to know how to fix it. Now, I have something to say. A lot of people talk about the difference between pain point marketing versus desire marketing. And I need you to know that if that ever comes out of somebody's mouth, you need to run in the other direction because they don't understand how the brain works. Having a desire and not yet having that thing is a form of pain. That is creating cognitive discomfort within their brain. That is painful for the brain. So the very fact that they have a desire, the very fact that they have something that they want and they do not have it yet is that cognitive dissonance. That discomfort is the number one thing that the brain seeks to solve. And it pisses me off when people say that because they're like, you're disempowering people with your marketing. What are you even saying? The fact that people have a problem is why they buy anything. And guess what? Desire marketing, speaking to desires, which by the way is only one of the 8 buying triggers. So good luck with that. Speaking to a desire is still uncovering a pain because when the brain doesn't have it yet, that is discomfort. But I digress. So identify the most common gaps or mistakes your audience is making, then create content that calls that out. Show them what they're doing wrong, why it's costing them, and then what needs to change. This is not about shaming them. It's just about opening their eyes to something that they didn't see. I get really fed up, like I said, when people are like, don't always just beat on the mistakes that your audience is making. Yeah, it's only one of 8 buying triggers, but how discourteous is it, in my opinion, to not showcase for people, not to illuminate the gap in their understanding, to not provide them with the information to understand that they are doing something wrong and it's costing them time or money or brain power, etc. Honestly, I find that a little offensive that people don't think that their audience is worth enough to help them understand what the mistakes are. I don't know, kind of gives me the ick. Trigger number 6. So what we added in was results. She was already posting screenshots, but real results with context. Most people share results with no context. They're like, client made 50K this month. Great. But it doesn't tell the story. It doesn't show how you got them there. It doesn't prove that you can replicate it. Real results follow a very simple structure: before, after, how. So where were they? The specific situation, the symptom, not just how much were they making. Get home to the situation. The after, where are they now? So what's that desired outcome that they have? And then how did you get them there? And this goes beyond just the strategy. This is the specific shifts that you had them make and how you facilitate those shifts. So, what about your process does that? Let me give you an example of this from my own content. Something that I talk about often on my Instagram story is our market research process and the way we actually map your audience's insights and their psychographics to these neuromarketing triggers. And so I'm not only talking about where people started and what we changed for them, what the shifts were the things that we uncovered, but I'm also tactically hitting home to what it was that we did on a logistical level to facilitate that. And that is part of future pacing and really pulling back the curtain and showing what it's like to work with you. Here's another example from this very podcast. Client who was reaching 8 to 10 million people per month, only making 10K, was working all the time, super burnout, couldn't understand why the content wasn't converting. It's like, what the heck is going on? I'm reaching millions of people. I should be making millions of dollars. Like, what is happening right now? And so we added in those missing buying triggers to our content. We raised the price, made the offer scalable. And a huge part of that was the market research that we did because we understood her audience so well to know what they needed to hear to buy. And because we understand the principles neurologically of what needs to happen, because we understand the principles on a neuropsychological level of what needs to happen for someone to buy, all we have to do is collect the insights on your audience and then connect it to those triggers. So, what are the symptoms that they're experiencing? What are the desires that they have? What are the objections that they have? What villain is going to be activating for them? What are the mistakes that they're making? It's honestly unbelievably simple. And then all we have to do is script the content in a way that it will hit on that buying trigger, which is what our clients have us do. So that's the difference. That's a result with context. It's believable, it's replicable, it builds trust. When you can show results with that context, people think, okay, she can actually do this and do it for me. It reduces perceived risk, which is very important, especially in today's economy and the trust deficit that we are in. It builds credibility and it makes the sale easier. So, what metric does this improve? Profile to link conversion, application conversion, and close rate. When your profile showcases real results with context in your highlights, your pin posts, when you talk about this in your content, people are more likely to click your link. And when your application page, when that copy reinforces those results, people are more likely to apply. And then people show up to calls already having seen your results. They're easier to close and they're actually going to show up. And so before, my client was just posting screenshots of testimonials. This client got 10K followers, no context, no story, not the how. And so we had her share the results with the full context. This client was posting 5 times a day, getting a ton of engagement, not getting any sales. And actually, the videos were getting really good views and a good amount of comments, but then people weren't following her. The after is that she actually hit $50,000 months, but beyond that, she was able to gain 10,000 followers in a very short period of time because they stopped chasing engagement, started optimizing for what actually makes someone want to follow you. And so people started trusting that she could actually deliver those results because she wasn't just showing the outcome, she was showing the process and pulling back the curtain as to some of the feedback that she provided for the client before and after with some of the content that was posted. Now, granted, I am not going to be posting before and afters of client content that was posted because I attract some really nutty people and I have shared client names and information in the past and I've had people go after my clients and I'm not about that life. I don't really care. I'm not going to do that. And there's a lot of ways that I can build authority and I can show a lot of context and I can provide a lot of proof outside of like, here's what the content looks like. Because ultimately, no one really cares what the content looks like. It's about what it does for them. So every time you share a result, include the context. Where was the client before? What was their day-to-day life? Where are they now? And then how did you get them there? What did you change? What was the strategy? And then logistically, how did you get them there? That's how you really build credibility, also without just sounding like you're bragging. So once you've calculated your metrics, you might be thinking, okay, what do I focus on first? Obviously, the worst metrics are what we want to focus on first. How do I actually implement all of this, right? So let me walk you through kind of the order. So you know where the breakdown is. Here's the framework that I decide what to fix first. It really does depend on what the metrics are telling you. So if you have good lead flow, if you get a good amount of applications, but your close rate is low, gotta fix your sales process. That's gonna be your priority. If your lead quality is trash, you need to either fix your application process, add more friction to the process, or we need to fix your content, because if people are applying who aren't a fit, something in your funnel is attracting the wrong people. If you're not reaching enough people, which, like I said, is very rare, by the way, then we have to fix that first, because without enough people to sell to, you don't have a sales process to optimize. If you are reaching enough people, but you're not converting them into applications, we need to fix the breakdown. So is it content to profile, profile to link, link to application? Find the lowest metric and fix that. And again, if you don't know how to fix it, that's great. We have an audit, we'll show you how to fix it. We'll literally write you content that will fix it. And if calls are booking, but then people aren't showing, we need to fix your reminder process or your qualification process. So it depends. There's no one size fits all answer. You have to look at your data, see where the biggest drop off is. If you are scoring below the minimum metrics that I gave you, book the audit. Book the audit. We'll fix it. Most people think that the content is the problem. Sometimes it is. The content going to improve all of your other metrics if it's actually decent. But for a lot of people, the breakdown is somewhere else. Like if your content's converting like 7% to your profile, that's great. But then your profile to link is like less than 2%. It's terrible. So the problem isn't even your content. It's probably your profile. Or maybe your content to profile is great, your profile to link is great, but your link to application is low. So you're getting plenty of people to that page, but then people aren't filling out your application. Great. So now we know where to focus. The data will tell you where to focus. That's why tracking those metrics is so important, because without the data, you're literally just you're not even doing anything. You're just spinning your wheels and running in circles with your eyes closed. Like, I don't understand. It blows me away. I talked to somebody, this was years ago. I will never forget. This is when I was still taking sales calls. And I had asked her about revenue. She was like, well, I think it's like this. And I'm like, what do you mean you think? Like, of all the things that you should know, revenue, at least, like, how are you tracking that? Well, I mean, I see what comes into my bank account. The gasp that I gasped on the call, she was like, what? I will never forget that. Anyway, but I digress. So how do we track all of this? Here's what we use. Number one, we have a master spreadsheet where we track all these metrics for ourselves. We just zhuzhed this up a little bit to give it to clients as well. So weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually. It's mostly, some of it is manual, some of it's not. We pull the data from Instagram Insights, from our link tracking tools, from our calendar software, and then we put it into the spreadsheet. It's not very time consuming. It would probably take you less than 10 minutes to plug those numbers in every week, but then you have all of the information you need to make decisions. UTM links is huge. We use UTM parameters on every single link so that we can track exactly where people are coming from. This is especially important for obviously link clicks and application conversions, understanding that. And ManyChat, you need to have UTM links for each of your different ManyChat triggers. If you're not using that, again, you're flying blind. You have no idea where your applications are coming from. Attribution is automated where we can automate it. So for example, when somebody submits an application, we can see the UTM source. So we know they came from Instagram, from email. If they came from email, we know what email they came from on what day. If they came from podcast, we know which episode, etc. But most of the tracking is manual. We're just pulling the data weekly and inputting it. Again, it's like a 10-minute task. It's not that deep. There are softwares that will do all of this for you, but they cost you hundreds of dollars a month. In my opinion, maybe in the future, but I feel like you can definitely make it to like 5 to 10 mil without it. So how often should you be tracking? Weekly, quick pulse checks, monthly for deeper analysis, quarterly for trends, and then annually for big picture strategy. You really don't need to obsess over the data every single day, but you do need to be checking it consistently so that you can catch problems early and be able to optimize. So here's what I need you to do after listening to this episode. Calculate your metrics. Pull your data for the last 30 days, calculate all of those metrics that we went through and write them down. Identify the breakdown. Which metric is below the minimum? That should be your focus. And then fix it. If you don't know how, if you can't, if you're like, I don't know how to add symptoms to my content. I don't know how to add a villain to my content. I don't know how to fix my bio. Wonderful. The link is in the show notes. We'll help you. Like I said, we'll review your content. We'll show you exactly where the breakdown is. If you can bring us these metrics, we can dig into them on that call when we review your audit, and we can tell you where to focus. We'll already know which of the 8 buying triggers you're missing from your content. So we'll likely know kind of where the breakdown is in your metrics before. Also, people get really pressed when I'm like, I can tell how much you're making by looking at your social media. Because if you have no symptoms, you have no villains that you're speaking to, you're not speaking to gaps and mistakes, then I know roughly which metrics are going to be lower on your account, and I can calculate it. I can see how many views you're getting, so I can figure out roughly what your reach is, and I can figure out if I can figure out the price of your offer, I can figure out how much you're making. It's really not that hard. Anyway, like I said, it's completely free. We really do this. We really create that 3-page document, walking you through what's broken, how to fix it, walk you through it on that call. And like I said, if what we uncover is something we can help with, great. We'll walk you through what that looks like. If not, great. Walk away with the audit, the content. Link is in the show notes. Book that audit. Let me help you. Please calculate those metrics, and then let's have a conversation. So that's all for this episode. Thanks for being here. See you in the next one.